And welcome back to Part 2 of ErynCerise's Top 20 Favorite Pokemon. Part 1 covers ranks 6 through 20, so if you haven't watched that yet, click the annotation or the card here to jump back and see that first. If you're ready to move on and see my top 5, let's dive right in with... Number 5, Audino. Here's the second of 3 Gen 5ers in a row in my top 10 after Chandelure. Can you tell I like Gen 5? Oh man, and one of the neatest mechanics that gen, in my opinion, was the inclusion of a Pokemon designed to be battled for EXP. It made grinding a lot easier for me in all versions of Unova that I played, for which I was very grateful. But I also felt bad too, because when you beat something up over and over again, you can't help but feel sorry for it. So weirdly enough, the more I pulverized Audino in the wild, the more attached to it I felt. So attached, in fact, that I eventually started training them. My favorite one to date has got to be Bonnie, who was the very first shiny Pokemon I ever bred. I transferred him over to my Alpha Sapphire cartridge to use as a starter, and with a moveset of Toxic, Protect, Dazzling Gleam, and Return, he made playing through one of my least favorite regions a lot more fun. I'd love to Mega Evolve him someday because Mega Audino has to be my absolute favorite Mega Evolution. But sadly, I still haven't bothered to finish the Delta episode, because I got so bored with Alpha Sapphire at that point, not even Bonnie could save it. Maybe now that I've made this list, I can finally work up the motivation to finish that and finally get the super sparkly magical bunny of my dreams. Number 4, Cofagrigus. Number 1 fave from Gen 5. Admittedly, I'm more of a fan of the version that appears in Drayano's Gen 5 hacks, which has the amazing Ghost Steel type. But even the official Cofagrigus offers some pretty interesting defensive and support strategies that I've had a lot of fun tooling around with in Showdown. More interesting to me, though, is the mystery of its existence. Everyone knows the deal with Yamask's creepy Pokedex entry, which states it is literally the soul of a dead human carrying around a mask of its former self. Well, what I want to know is, if that's what Yamask is, what does that make Cofagrigus? I mean, Cofagrigus has equally creepy entries. Apparently, it literally eats grave robbers and turns them into mummies, trapping them inside itself forever. Jeebus, talk about I have no mouth and I must scream, jeez. But that still doesn't tell me what it is in relation to Yamask. So, Yamask is a dead human soul that can not only be captured and do battle, but also evolve? Are all these dead souls happy turning into giant yellow people eaters? Is becoming a Cofagrigus a form of jealousy and vengeance against the still living? Is that why it turns people into mummies? But it apparently only attacks grave robbers, so there's some sense of greater justice at work there too. Maybe a Cofagrigus is a Yamask that has become so at peace with death that it respects death profoundly and will destroy any living being who dares defile it. And if it's at peace with what it is, that would certainly explain why Cofagrigus looks so gleeful compared to its sad little pre-evolution. Anyway, I won't ramble too much more about this, but there is one more thing I want to add, and you know what it is if you've watched my Let's Play series through all these years. Nefertiti. I won't say any more than that. If you know, then you know. Okay, I'm done. Number 3, Vaporeon. The other evolutions can come too. There's one Pokemon I was sure was going to top this list when I first conceived of making it. Vaporeon has been my favorite since I was a little girl, and through all the years, I never questioned it being in that spot because, well, it's always been my favorite. That's just the way it's always been. It looks like a fox combined with a mermaid. It can turn invisible. It's a good attacker, a great defender with a giant HP stat, and it has enough moves to make for a really useful support Pokemon. Those things are all still true, so why did I finally decide that Vaporeon is no longer my number 1? Well, for one thing, and this is going to sound super shallow, but the neck frill. I never liked Vaporeon's neck frill, but I've always tried to pretend that I did like it because I otherwise loved its design to pieces. I was really into mermaids as a kid, you guys, you don't even know. Anything mermaid related was basically guaranteed to be my number 1 anything at that age. The deck was rigged in Vaporeon's favor from the start. Anyway, it took until recently to finally realize that, no, I hate the way that frill looks. It's stupid looking and weird, and I don't like it. It's a shallow thing, but design is an important aspect of Pokemon for me, as I think I've made clear from the rest of this list. So a glaring point of dislike honestly does hurt a Pokemon in my eyes. And before you go thinking I'm being too nitpicky, there is a more substantial problem too, and it's that I don't find Vaporeon or the other evolutions that interesting to battle with anymore. Pretty much all the Eevees have similar tricks up their sleeves, and after having run them on countless teams, both competitive and non, I have to say I'm tired of what they have to offer, especially Vaporeon, whom I've battled with the most of all. The strategies themselves aren't bad, they're still kind of interesting, but I'm so saturated on them at this point that I can't bring myself to be as enthused about them as I once was. Still, I do have a history with Vaporeon and all the evolutions, and I do still love all their designs to pieces, a few problems here and there aside. They're still foxy and cute and sleek and elegant and creative, and there's a reason so many people love them so much. The core concept of having one Pokemon that becomes so many others is still so cool to me all these years later, and which evolution is a person's favorite seems to say a lot about them, I find. And like I said, personal tiredness with using them over and over again aside, making an evolution work on a team is still a worthwhile task if you're not overexposed to them. Sylveon especially seems to be an interesting addition to the Eevee pantheon. I mean, I've seen it compete in the Ubers tier and hold its own. That's crazy, I love it! So yeah, Vaporeon and the evolutions. No longer my absolute favorites by divine right of childhood nostalgia, but I can still never fully give up my love for them either, and so they'll always hold a strong place in my heart. Number 2. Shellos and Gastrodon. These ones are pretty recent favorites. The Shellos line was nowhere on my radar prior to my work on YouTube. I never got hugely into Diamond and Pearl when they came out, and I certainly never found or trained a Shellos or Gastrodon when I did play. They seemed like gimmicky filler Pokemon at first glance, so I never really thought about them until, again, the Volt White 2 order lock, when I caught a little Shellos named Cucumber. I didn't really know what to make of her, never having trained a Shellos before, but I took her into the fold gladly anyway to see what I was in for. Cucumber ended up being an indispensable member of the team, and finished a spectacular run in the lock by taking out Colress single-handedly and retiring as a big, beautiful Gastrodon. Her legacy continued in the dice lock with Pickle, who for some reason I was not super thrilled to catch at first, but who quickly proved himself to be a very worthy member of the team in his own right. At times he wasn't sure if he could live up to the example set by his predecessor, but after stumbling into a leadership role, literally, get it? Role, and then meeting the love of his life, he finally gained the confidence he needed to come into his own. Even more so than Cucumber, Pickle really became the heart and soul of the Dice Lock team, and is really the most memorable Pokemon from that entire run to me. If you haven't watched the Dice Lock yet, it's very worth watching through to see him grow from tiny squishy beginnings to glorious curb-stomping ocean beauty. I may have thought Gastrodon looked like a filler Pokemon before, but now when I see one, I see a majestic sea beast rearing its horned head out of the water with a mighty plus the West Sea version is pink. I do love me some pinkums. And as if the sentimental story weren't enough, I found that Shellos is one of my favorite Pokemon to use in Little Cup, too. Shellos' Sticky Hold is such a useful ability in a tier where knockoff runs rampant, and after boosting its defense and special defense to ungodly levels, it can stay on the field recovering and attacking for a long, long time before getting taken out. Gastrodon is slightly less useful in competitive because its lack of speed really catches up with it at that level, but its typing is still so great. Storm Drain is a super useful ability, and again, Recover can help it stay alive longer than many players expect. And in-game, Water Ground is just the most useful. Oh my god. So yeah, those are my second favorite Squishums in all of Pokemon. What could possibly be first, you ask? Well, before we get there, let me first rattle off a few honorable mentions. I love these Pokemon as well, and they just barely missed making the top 20. Ready? Okay. Vileplume, Favorite fully evolved Gen 1 grass type. Fun design, cool in-game cry. Badass legacy thanks to Pro Jared's Vileplume. Nop will consume all. Lilligant. Adorably pretty grass type with a killer quiver dance set. Really love my Lilligant Mary, who I used on Pokemon White too. Amora. Favorite Gen 6 Pokemon. So cute! First Pokemon I fully super trained too. Also, dat refrigerate ability. Cresselia. Favorite legendary. Pretty as all get out. Makes me nostalgic for Sailor Moon. Finally got one in-game and will never let it go. Swanna. Unexpected badass of my Pokemon X run. So happy whenever a Pokemon impresses you when you weren't expecting it to. Goldie the Swanna forever. Dugong. Big and beautiful water ice type with added Gen 1 nostalgia. The other half of the Luna Silky pair that I loved so much in my leaf green wedlock. And Pikachu and Raichu. There is never not a place in my heart for everyone's favorite electric rodents. So glad Raichu got the speed boost it deserved in Gen 6 too. Alright, with that out of the way, let's check in at... Number 1. Clefable. When I had my crisis of conscience about Vaporeon, I was in a bit of legitimate distress. If Vaporeon wasn't my favorite anymore, then who was? It would have to be a Pokemon I still had a history with. Sentiment runs very strong with me. But it also had to be something I wasn't sick of seeing or battling with. Something that still felt fresh after almost 2 decades of Pokemoning. So I started combing through Pokemon. I used the favorite Pokemon picker over at dragonflycave.com to go through every single Pokemon, systematically eliminating ones that I knew would never be even close, and narrowing in on the ones that were truly still special and exciting to me. It really helped me in writing this whole list, though I ended up tweaking the order a few times afterward to account for context in several cases. And when it came down to it, one Pokemon just kept winning, hand over fist. Nostalgia-wise, battle-wise, and design-wise. Clefable was the clear winner. There's always been something special about the Clefairy line. It was so rare to run into Clefairy in Mount Moon that seeing one after struggling through hordes and hordes of Zubat and Geodude really did make it feel like the mythical fairy of its name. Despite that, I don't remember ever really training Clefairy back in the Gen 1 days. Maybe that was because Jigglypuff was available earlier and more readily, so by the time I found Clefairy, I already had a pink puffball Pokemon to use. The first time I remember actually getting to use Clefairy wasn't until I was in university, after not having played Gen 1 for many years. I made a concerted effort to find and use Clefairy instead of Jigglypuff in that run, and after I'd trained one up enough to justify using a Moonstone, my Clefable, Blanche, became nigh unstoppable. She was incredibly bulky and packed a ton of variety in her moveset like Wigglytuff did. Plus I had a lot of fun using Metronome and seeing what kind of havoc I could wreak on the game. It was a blast, one of the most fun non-Nuzlocke runs I've ever done. Then came the release of Pokemon X and Y, and Clefable only got more impressive. It had already had several workable competitive strategies prior to Gen 6, but after its retyping and loss of fighting weakness, its viability and competitive skyrocketed. When building my main OU team for Showdown, I included Clefable after seeing examples of people using its Cosmic Power Stored Power set to great effect. And sure enough, that became one of my favorite strategies to use. There's something satisfying about building up Cosmic Power after Cosmic Power, and then soft-boiling away any damage you built up in the meanwhile. Then becoming an unstoppable fairy killing machine with Stab, Moonblast, and fully boosted stored power. Plus with Magic Guard and a Toxic Orb, you can almost always have it so that your strategy isn't interrupted by sleep or paralysis. Plus you don't have to worry about annoyances like weather damage, Leech Seed, or entry hazards. And I should mention, the Cosmic Power Stored Power strategy isn't even one of its best. There are loads of other possibilities for an even better Clefable set, including ones with Calm Mind, Wish, Knockoff, Encore, entry hazards, status moves, a variety of strong special attacks, and even its other ability, Unaware. All these options give it a huge fun factor and an unpredictability for opponents. There's always something new to try out with Clefable in battle, which I foresee keeping it fresh for me for a long time to come. Last but not least, I want to talk about Clefable's design, which shares many of the same positives as Wigglytuff's. Pink, rabbit ears, chubby body, tiny limbs, cute little tuft of hair over the eyes. The little wings and the big puffy tail give it a more memorable silhouette too. And a lot of people have pointed out that these additions make Clefable look awfully similar to Gengar. While I'm not sure I buy the theory that Gengars are dead Clefables, the fact that Clefable's shape is rounded but also sharp and angular like Gengar's in places helps make it a little bit cooler looking than the other doughy pink puffballs in the game. Also, like Gengar and Wigglytuff, there's a simplicity to Clefable's overall look that I really like. While I also love Pokemon from later generations, just look at how many Gen 5 Pokemon are on my list, there's something to be appreciated about how basic a lot of the designs in Gen 1 still were. Gen 1 was the very first set of games and didn't have to worry about outdoing itself yet. And more importantly, it was made with more limited graphical technology, so the developers were forced to boil down Pokemon designs to their essence to get their concepts across. That is a bird. That is a rat. That is a bat. That is a ball of cute. Incidentally, Clefairy was originally meant to be the mascot of the Pokemon series, not Pikachu. One of the Pokemon manga that was never brought over to North America, Pokemon Pocket Monsters, was written when this was still the plan, and oh god, what is that? Jesus Christ, who let that sin beast in here? Get it away, fucking god! Terrifying art aside, you can see how Clefairy was originally meant to be a gender-neutral mascot Pokemon that was meant to appeal to both boys and girls, and so it has a strong iconic simplicity befitting of that status. Ultimately, Pikachu ended up being more successful at that as it went on to become the star of the anime, but Clefairy still benefits from that iconic design sensibility, and Clefable by association gets a slice of that design pie as well. Not a lot of extraneous patterning, simple body shape, darker patches of color to break up the all-pink color scheme a bit, and again, just enough unique touches like the hair, tail, and wings to make it memorable. Anyway, I think I've said approximately 10 times as much about Clefable as I've said about any other Pokemon on this list, so I won't go on more than that. But needless to say, I think I'm a lot more assured in my list of favorites than I've been in a long time, especially for my number one spot. It was fun to really think hard and consider what matters about Pokemon to me now, as opposed to assuming my favorites based on who I was over 15 years ago. I'm not the same person I was when I first started playing Pokemon, and different things stand out to me now than they did back then. Plus, I have a lot more experience and memories behind me now that have shed light on Pokemon I'd never even thought of before. I'm sure things will only continue to change as more generations of Pokemon get added and I get older, and I can't wait to see what my list will look like in another 10 years or so. So there you have it, my top 20 Pokemon and then some. Thanks for sticking around with me for this long, and I hope you enjoyed me sharing my stories and weird opinions. Also want to give a big shout out to one of my patrons and longtime subscribers, TJ Allen 53149. I know I only do one Pokemon series on this channel right now, so I really hope you enjoyed this new splash of Pokemon videos in your sub feed. And to everyone who's watching right now, I'd really like to hear what some of your favorites are in return. Leave a comment and tell me which Pokemon are your favorites and why. Have they changed over time like they have for me? Or are you still as in love with your early favorites as the day you first laid eyes on them? What kinds of memories have shaped your favorites? And which Pokemon have you gotten attached to that you never thought you would? Share your thoughts and let me know if you like some of the Pokemon I've listed too. Thanks again, and I will see you in the next video.